When Batman the Animated Series hit screens in 1992, it didn't tiptoe onto television, it pounced. By the early 90s, kids' cartoons were meant to be bright, safe and marketable. Instead, this show rolled out with moody Art Deco skylines, noir shadows and a Batman who was less of a Saturday morning mascot and more vengeful figure of the night. It was bold, sometimes weird, and I would argue the definitive take on Batman. But here's the twist. The very first episode most audiences saw wasn't the eerie detective tale on leather wings, despite what DVD lists and streaming platforms say. No, the network led with The Cat and the Claw, a two-parter packed with explosions, rooftop flirtations, and a brand new villain in Red Claw. What I find fascinating about this episode is how it tells us a lot about how networks thought Batman needed to be sold. More interestingly, it also makes clear that the series was willing to push boundaries and frame Gotham as a world more progressive than what audiences might have expected. I have previously talked about On Leather Wings, the true production pilot, and how it was the perfect episode to set the tone for the series. With that in mind, you may find yourself wondering why TV stations aired The Cat and the Claw as the first episode in most regions. In the Heart of Batman documentary, executive producer Gene McCurdy explained that they front-loaded the debut with heavy hitters like On Leather Wings, Heart of Ice, Feet of Clay and The Joker's Favour, all designed to hook viewers early and maybe make them more forgiving of the jankier episodes. And yet, with the best will in the world, The Cat and the Claw doesn't really fit this mould. But I can see why it was picked. Executives tend to play things safe. Remember that at the time, producers Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski had never made their own show before, and they did things differently. They wanted to make a cartoon that more accurately reflected the Batman of the comics, rather than calling back to Adam West's Batman, which is what the networks would have wanted. And their commitment to Batman's roots made some executives nervous. So instead of opening with a slow, horror-tinged detective story, they went with a bombastic action piece featuring a recognisable villain in Catwoman. Let's not forget that she had just appeared in Batman Returns a few months prior, and was one of the most popular characters from the 60s TV show for reasons. It wasn't the strongest story, but for a premiere episode, it was way less risky. It was recognisable, action-packed, had a little bit of romance, and was bankable. At the same time, it may have misrepresented the show. This was more of an action-romance episode, which we didn't see too much of again in the series. Subsequent episodes were tonally completely different. Anti-establishment tragedies with wounded and damaged antagonists, and not just supervillains. While it didn't quite reflect the series' noir heart, it did reveal something else that set this cartoon apart from other shows of the era. A willingness to put women at the centre of Gotham's story without it feeling like tokenism. It fared into the girl power phase of the early 90s, with Catwoman walking the tightrope between hero and villain, and the nefarious Red Claw threatening the city. This was actually pretty rare in the 90s, and something that critics of representation in modern media forget is that Batman the Animated Series was woke as hell. Women are at the front and centre of this story. When Red Claw asks Batman if he has a problem with powerful women, he responds that he's an equal opportunity crime fighter. It's very on the nose, but sometimes you can't be subtle. There's one particular scene that I think really well establishes the male and female power dynamic in Gotham, and that's the charity auction scene. Traditionally, these kinds of auctions have been men bidding on dates with attractive women, at least in pop culture anyway, but The Cat and the Claw flips this. At the charity auction, Bruce Wayne is one of the prizes, and the women are the ones placing bids. Selina Kyle dramatically wins the auction by calling out a $10,000 bid from the shadows, instantly reframing her as someone who makes choices rather than someone who waits to be chosen. An important thing to remember is that at the time, the character of Selina Kyle wasn't really all that well developed. In most earlier cartoons and TV shows, she wasn't even mentioned. She was only ever Catwoman, and in the comics, she had been everything from socialite to prostitute. But here, she's a powerful woman, independently wealthy, and with a mission of her own, beyond just lining her own pockets. What makes this depiction of Selina even more progressive is her mission. She isn't just a glamorous socialite, she's an animal rights activist, willing to challenge Gotham's elites on behalf of the voiceless. Making her a Robin Hood-style thief, robbing from the rich to give to the needy, frames her as a social justice warrior. She made a huge bid on Bruce Wayne for the animals that were the beneficiaries of the event, not because she was interested in him. Despite him being Gotham's most eligible bachelor, Selina is initially dismissive of Bruce Wayne and dreads her first date with him. Once he shows his usefulness, getting her a face-to-face meeting with the president of Multigon International, a company that bought up land she had been eyeing for a nature reserve, she warms to him. While Catwoman is one of Batman's most well-known villains, she isn't really the baddie of the episode. That title goes to a brand new character made for the show, Red Claw. Now, I've previously looked at Red Claw and came to the conclusion that she was a bit of a one-note, generic, vaguely Eastern European James Bond-style villain. She may not be particularly deep, but she is symbolically important, at least in this story. She is also a woman with power and agency, the head of an international terrorist organisation that controls Multigon International. The president of the company, a man called Stern, is one of Red Claw's lackeys, and he used company funds to buy up the contested land because it houses an abandoned military base. He claimed they were planning to build a resort in the wilderness for the ultra-wealthy, but in reality it is Red Claw's base of operations. You can draw some interesting parallels between Catwoman and Red Claw, both animal-themed and strong women, but while Catwoman works alone, excluding her cat Isis, Red Claw commands an army. Catwoman uses her wealth to protect defenseless animals, while Red Claw's motives are money, power, and control, although it is a bit underdeveloped. What she does show is that in this world, women can be anything. From seductive, stealthy thieves all the way through to powerful, brutal warlords. I guess she's more of a statement of the show's intent than a fully fleshed out person. Even as a two-dimensional character, Red Claw is still noteworthy, a clever tactician, a powerful fighter, and utterly ruthless. She and her cronies steal a military shipment of a deadly nerve gas and hold Gotham City to ransom. There is a plot point early on that nobody has ever managed to take a picture of Red Claw before, and the authorities are expecting a man to turn up. So when she is revealed to be a woman, audiences are supposed to be surprised. Similarly, her plot to poison all of Gotham City was quite unusual for a Saturday morning cartoon at the time. In earlier Batman cartoons, villains were predominantly thieves, or tried to uncover Batman's secret identity. But here the stakes are much higher, even if Red Claw's motivations are woefully underdeveloped. Everything starts to unravel for Red Claw after Catwoman uncovers her connection to Multigon when she goes looking for dirt on the company. However, two can play that game, as Red Claw's minions stalk Catwoman, uncover her secret, and try to kill her. From there, Catwoman and Batman have to team up to save Gotham. And speaking of Batman, there are some nice moments that show how, despite his shadowy exterior, he is a kind and compassionate man. He selflessly risks his own life to save Isis from being run over by a van, which endears him to Catwoman. When one of Red Claw's henchmen stalks Selina's assistant Maven, Batman intervenes just in time. Similarly, at the story's conclusion, when he resigns himself to the fact that he has to bring Catwoman in, we are shown his integrity. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the plot itself, but when compared to the dizzying heights of subsequent episodes like Heart of Ice, Two-Face and Feet of Clay, with their raw, emotional gut punches or the touching, more personal stories of It's Never Too Late and Appointment in Crime Alley, The Cat and the Claw is just fine. Where it is left wanting is in the second part's animation, provided by Acom Productions. Compare the beautifully staged chase across the rooftops in part 1 with the clunky car chase in part 2. It's like night and day. Excuse the pun. The nighttime city is beautifully detailed and the action is generally smoothly animated. Catwoman's movements are fluid and you can almost feel the impact from her blows. The daytime chase in part 2, meanwhile, is generally pretty sloppy. There's no sense of speed from the moving vehicles and the backgrounds are just there. Producer Bruce Timm went on the record to say that the whole final sequence of part 2 was geared around explosions, but they were some of the worst he had seen, despite the fact that they had asked the studio to retake them several times. Unfortunately, they ran out of time and had to air them as they were. This isn't the only time that one part of a two-part story was let down by Acom, see also Feet of Clay Part 1, which is why the studio was prematurely cut. But still, these are okay episodes. It's a romance action story with the irony that Catwoman loves Batman but not Bruce, while Bruce wants Selina but Batman only wants to catch Catwoman. Their courtship came about quickly, but really didn't last all that long and it just kind of fades away as the series progresses. So I wouldn't say that The Cat and the Claw is the crown jewel of Batman the Animated Series. It's a little uneven, a little unconventional, and the second half stumbles. As a child, I would have preferred it if they debuted with On Leather Wings, but I was still very happy with The Cat and the Claw. As an adult thinking about it, I can see that it did something important. It sold Batman to audiences with action and romance while signalling that this Gotham would be more progressive, more daring, and more complex than Saturday morning TV had ever been. They reimagined one of Batman's oldest villains for the modern era and created some new characters, which they would go on to do multiple times with varying degrees of success. So, upon reflection, perhaps I was too critical in calling this a safe episode. Maybe those executives had the right idea, even if the jump from The Cat and the Claw to On Leather Wings was so stark that it gave a generation of kids whiplash. Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send a buck or two my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. And special thanks to my channel members. Everyone who was a member at the time of this video's creation is listed on the screen right now. If you want to see your name amongst all these wonderful people, join the channel now. Next time. I'll be back on Friday to talk about a rarely seen villain from the golden age of comics who had some good intentions, especially as seen in Batman the Animated Series. I'll be talking about the Crime Doctor. And then next Monday I'm going back to my latest The Batman villain poll to talk about how the show handled one of Batman's oldest foes, Catwoman. Hope to see you then.